Alright, so here I just want to provide a brief introduction to working with local files inside of Python. So first off, if you're on a Windows machine, Windows by default is going to use the backslash to separate the components of a file path as opposed to the /. And as you've already seen in prior videos, the backslash has special meaning, so that's going to create some issues if you state that within a string, right? So if you have a string that represents a file path. Okay, so to fix that issue, there's two options. One is you can just go through and replace all of the backslashes with /. So that's what I did here. So this should have been, or on a Windows machine, this would have been a backslash, but I just went through and changed it to a /. You can see how that's already messing up the string there. So switching your backslashes to // is one way to fix that issue. Another way to do it is to double up the backslashes. And in this case, the first backslash is being used as the escape, and then the second is the actual backslash. So this is basically just telling it to treat the backslash as a backslash instead of a special character. So either of those will generate a readable file path on Windows. Now, if you're on a machine that's not Windows-based, for example, anything that's like a Unix or Unix-like system like Mac OS or a Linux distro, then it already is going to use the /, so that won't be an issue. All right, this is just a quick example of how to read in a CSV file, so a comma-separated values file. And to do this, I'm reading it in using the pandas library or pandas module. So first I have to have access to the functions associated with that module, so I import it, and I'm importing it as PD, so that's its alias name. PD is a common alias for pandas. I'm also reading in NumPy, which I really don't need to here, and I'm giving it an alias of NP, which is common alias for NumPy. And then once that's imported, we can use the reads_CSV function. And here I'm providing the path to the CSV file. I'm telling it it's got commas for separators, that it has a header, and I'm telling it what the character encoding is. And then to test this and just to see if it read it incorrectly, next I just use the head method on the data frame object that's created when the data are read in, and I'm just plotting the first, or printing the first 10 rows. So anyway, this is an example of that output I already had read in there. So again, we'll play around more with this later. We'll work pretty extensively with pandas and talk about reading in like tabular data, so things like CSV files or Excel spreadsheets or something. All right, this is just an example of reading in an image, and to do that, I'm using the CV2 module. So this is OpenCV Python binary extension loader. So basically, this allows for the use of the Open Computer Vision library within Python. And then to actually plot the image, we're using matplotlib, which is like a library that has submodules, and we're specifically using this pyplot, which we're importing as plot. So anyway, matplotlib is what a lot of the graphing in Python is based on top of. So again, we'll look at that in more detail later. So you'll see that a lot for graphing and also just plotting, raster-based like image data. All right, so anyway, I'm using the imRead function from CV2 to actually read in a file, and this is just the path to a file on disk. Note that this is a JPEG file. It's just an image file. It's not like a geospatial raster layer or anything. It's just an image, like a picture you would take with your phone or with your camera or whatever. And then I'm using the imShow function, this coming out of matplotlib to actually plot it, and you can already see it there. But if I run this, again, that's the output. Okay, and then this last section here, I just want to show you just some examples of working with directories. All right, so to start off with, I'm going to use the OS module, and this allows access to the operating system and to your file directory through Python. And again, this is an example of a module that just kind of comes with Python. You don't have to install it separately or anything. Okay, so I'm importing the module, then I list out a file path here, And this is, again, we're using the forward slashes here as opposed to the backslashes. And then from OS, we're using this function called list directory. And basically what that does, it lists all the files inside of a directory. So I just feed it as a argument the directory that you want to read the files from or list the files from. And then to pull out only the files that are text files, I used some list comprehension here. So for each file in the files, return it if it ends with .txt. So that's just some list comprehension, and I print the result. And then lastly, I go through and I concatenate on the file path or the folder path to each of the files. So again, this is just some list comprehension. So for the file in the file list, just print back the directory plus the forward slash plus file name, and then this is what we get there. So there's your list of files, and then this is with them concatenated on. Okay, and then the last block here just shows a couple other ways you can do that. Again, there's generally multiple ways to accomplish tasks. So I've created 3 different functions here that work a little bit differently to basically read the files with a certain extension from a directory and return those into a list object. Okay, so the first one here is basically just a function version of what I did up here. So again, I'm using OS, and I'm specifically using the list directory function. So here I'm creating a function. I'm calling it list files 1. It accepts it has 2 parameters there that accept arguments. So the directory that you're exploring and the extension of the files that you're interested in, and then it returns back an object. So here we have 4 files in the directory. Return it if it ends in the specified extension. So that's the first method, is basically just building on top of this. This is the same thing, but using a different function from the OS module. So if you hover over this, it'll tell you about it. So for each directory in the directory tree rooted at top, including top itself, but excluding and whatever, it yields a 3-tuple dir path, dir name, and file name result, right? So effectively, this is just a different function. So what this can do is go into a directory and also subdirectories within a directory, and it's going to return back a tuple that's going to consist of the directory path, the name of the directory, and then the name of the file in the directory. Okay, so basically what we're doing here is for the 3 variables that are returned for each object in walking through the directory of interest, I'm just going to return back the file name, again, if it ends in the specified extension. So anyway, walk is really useful, especially if you want to go through a bunch of subdirectories instead of just like an individual folder. And then lastly here, we're making use of OS and this glob module, which here just returns, it tells you what that does, to do it as a third way. So again, we're creating a third function here, list files 3. It's going to accept the directory and an extension. So the first thing we have to do is we have to save the current working directory. So we use get current working directory function, and then we save that to a variable saved. And then we change the working directory to the directory of interest. And then we use this glob function to get back all the files that end in the specified extension. And then we switch back to the original working directory, so everything's back to normal, and then we return back our list. Okay, and then here we just use those functions. So we're going to do directory is equal to, so this is the directory we're interested in. Note that both of these are going to return back a tuple, so I'm just converting the tuple into a list there, and this returns back a list, so we don't need to convert it into a tuple. And then again, we just apply those methods and then print the results. and you can see here we get the same thing. So just our a list object of the text files inside of that folder. So what I was basically wanting to show you here is that there's multiple ways to accomplish this task, and that's common in Python. And there's not always one way that's better or worse. A lot of times it just comes down to personal preference or a specific use case.